This is Akashvani. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on strengthening bilateral relationship between India and Saudi Arabia. The participants are Ashok Sajjanhar, former diplomat, and Vinay Kumar, journalist.
Just a day after the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, which is an ambitious infrastructure project to connect India to Europe via West Asia, was unveiled at the G20 summit, India and Saudi Arabia have signed 8 agreements on Monday to boost cooperation in a range of areas, from energy to interconnectivity, digitalization and electronic manufacturing to finance and security. In fact, Prime Minister Narendra Modi held a bilateral meeting with the visiting Saudi Crown Prince and Prime Minister Mohammed bin Salman bin, who was on a day-long state visit on Monday. After the conclusion of the G20 summit, he had stayed back in New Delhi. Both the leaders also reviewed the strategic ties between the two countries and signed 8 pacts. Ambassador Sajjanhar, if we see this development, generally Saudi Arabia is associated with supply of oil to India. But now if we see the expanse and wide-ranging bilateral ties between the two countries, which are now strategic ties, and the economic cooperation which is being given a boost, what is your assessment? How do you see this important visit of the Saudi Crown Prince to India?
Yeah, thank you very much, Vinay. I agree that this was a very significant visit, a very important visit, and coming just 4 years after his last visit. I think the frequency of visits between the two countries, between Saudi Arabia and India, over the last 10 years itself will provide an indication in terms of the vitality and the dynamism that this relationship has assumed. And also the fact, as you said very correctly, that earlier this used to be an energy relationship, it used to be an energy partnership, but now, of course, it has grown much beyond that, and it has transformed itself into a strategic partnership. Just to give you an example, if you were to look, immediately after India's independence, the first visit by Saudi king to India was in 1955. After that, the next visit to India by the Saudi king was in 2006. That means after 51 years. Then even as far as India is concerned, we had the visit of the Indian Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, to Saudi Arabia in 1982. And the next visit took place in 2010. That is after a gap of about 28 years. But all this has changed over the last 10 years. As I said, this is the second visit by His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. His last visit here was in 2019. And now the second visit after participating in the G20 summit is taking place in 2023. So the relationship has indeed grown, it has expanded, it has deepened in a very significant way. Of course, the supply of crude oil continues to be a very significant element of the bilateral partnership. But in addition to that, if I could just mention a couple of other elements which have emerged as very significant parts, aspects of our bilateral partnership. One is in terms of the Indian diaspora. That is a huge diaspora in Saudi Arabia. So, number one, their welfare, of course, is a very important element in our bilateral partnership. And when Prime Minister Modi met the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, he of course thanked him for the very good care that Saudi Arabia is taking of our people, and also during times of difficulty, during the COVID period, the care that was extended to them. Then there are significant amounts of inward remittances that this Indian diaspora sends to India. For the latest figures that have come, it is in the range of $5 to $6 billion. And that is also a huge amount. And this is very good for our balancing our budget and balance of payment requirements. The third element would be in terms of the trade and economic cooperation, which is also grown very significantly. Saudi Arabia has today emerged as the 4th largest trading partner of India. And this is about $53 billion. Of course, the trade is heavily weighted in favor of Saudi Arabia because we are very significant importers of energy, as we were talking earlier. So we import currently about 16 to 18% of our total requirements of oil from Saudi Arabia. And as I'm sure the listeners would know, India is very deficient in fossil fuels, crude oil and gas, and we import about 85% of our needs, of our requirement from other countries. So this is the trade partnership is also very significant.
Ambassador Sajjanhar, I would also like you to shed some light on this ambitious infrastructure project of the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, IMEC. It is being seen as, something which we can compare to China's Belt and Road Initiative, which is, much in discussion. So how significant will this be? And what kind of role, countries like Saudi Arabia can play in this?
Yeah, I think that this project is really game changer. And it is not only in terms of the economic implications and ramifications of this project, but I think it has huge geostrategic significance also. And it would be important for us not to lose sight of that. Of course, what it implies is that it would be a multimodal connectivity project. The connectivity from here to the Gulf region to the United Arab Emirates by sea, by ships, and from there it would be a road and rail connectivity through the UAE, through Saudi Arabia, through Israel, through Jordan, and going up to Europe. So I think in terms of the time spent, it will be much less. In terms of the cost involved, it will be much less. So it will be a very efficient way to send our goods from here to Europe and also to West Asia. It is going to make our goods more competitive because the freight element will be less. I think even as far as the climate aspects are concerned, since there would be less time that would be used for transporting these goods from India to Europe, it would be more environmentally sustainable. So it will be more efficient in terms of costing, it will be more competitive, and climatically it will be more sustainable. So I think it's going to be really a game changer. Now, why I say that it also has geostrategic implications and ramifications. China has been making forays into this part of the world, into Middle East. We've seen that some years ago, it signed $400 billion deal with Iran over a 25-year period and has agreed to import oil and gas from Iran for this period. And also, it has become a part of its Belt and Road Initiative. So it will create highways and railways and put in oil pipelines and other sort of infrastructure in terms of power plants, etc. It is going to construct in Iran. Also, its footprint in the Middle East and West Asia is also increasing because we have recently seen that China was in the forefront of this mending of relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And now we have seen recently both the countries have also established their embassies in each other's capitals. So that is moving forward, and that has given a significant boost to the image of China as far as the region is concerned. Then very recently, we also saw President Xi Jinping going to Saudi Arabia, and a large number of a slew of agreements in the area of oil, gas, not only energy, but also infrastructure and BRI, etc. they were signed. So China was expanding its footprint, and there was talk that the United States is withdrawing from this region because, earlier its interest used to be to get cheap supply of oil. But now the US, it doesn't need to import oil from this region. So it was being thought that the United States is slowly withdrawing from this region because it is becoming more interested in the Indo-Pacific, where the challenge from China has grown. But the fact that the United States is behind this, is fully supportive of this India, Middle East, Europe corridor, that it means that the United States continues to be engaged with the region. So I would say that both for economic considerations as well as geopolitical considerations, I think this is a huge deal, and we will, of course, need to ensure that it is constructed quickly, that it doesn't stay on paper. And I think if it does, if we are able to put it in place and if it is able to deliver as we think it should and it would, then much of the significance and the importance of the Belt and Road Initiative of China, where it gives money without any conditions, of course, but it lands the recipient countries into debt traps, etc. So, that problem to an extent will also be taken care of.
So one more aspect which comes to my mind is that, apart from the 8 agreements which two sides signed, which included upgradation of their hydrocarbon energy partnership to a comprehensive energy partnership for renewable petroleum and strategic reserves, over 24 MOUs were also signed between Indian and Saudi Arabian companies as well. And they range from information technology, agriculture, pharmaceuticals, petrochemicals, and human resources. And you were pointing out about the imbalance in the trade ties to countries. So, Ambassador Sajjan, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that, India can do a lot in the field of information technology, digital technology, as well pharmaceutical. Our companies have done very well. So, are these areas will be able to open up to Saudi Arabia?
I think so. Earlier, there used to be some sort of problem, difficulty in accessing the Saudi market. But now, over the last few years, we have seen that the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, he has started opening up the country and also the economy. And in that context, I think there will be very many opportunities. There'll be very many possibilities, because you are very right when you said that a number of MOUs have been signed, and I don't have the exact figures. But I think it will become clear in the coming days. But there were more than 500 visiting delegates and delegates from India who participated in this economic forum that took place in Mumbai during this period. And several high-value MOUs have been signed, which will give a very strong push and impetus to bilateral economic cooperation. I think even in the area of investments, both sides can expand that, both sides can increase that very significantly. We also have this $100 billion that I was talking about, that it was agreed that about 45 billion would be invested in the West Coast Refinery and Petrochemicals project in Maharashtra, and discussions on that have been going on. There is a joint working group that has also been established to look at all these projects, the areas that you have mentioned just now, Vinay, that as to how the balance of the $55 billion, I think about $5 billion have already been invested out of this amount. So still there is a good amount of about $50 billion left as to how that can be invested in these areas that you have mentioned. There have been agreements that have been signed on desalination, on grid connectivity. And I think there are huge possibilities. The digital public infrastructure, in which India has registered huge strides. So I think there are a large number of areas where both the countries can work and take the relationship forward. And of course, defense and security cooperation, sharing of intelligence, that is another area which has huge promise, and both the countries are working on that. In terms of naval exercises that is taking place between the two sides, we had the visit of our former army chief also to Saudi Arabia. Their discussions have also been held. So I think there are so many things also in the pipeline, and this is definitely come to fruition and to maturity as we go forward.
Before we close this discussion, to use the words of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, what he told visiting Crown Prince and Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, that the relationship between the two fastest growing economies is very important for regional and global stability, human welfare and prosperity. So let's hope that these words will always ring in the background while India and Saudi Arabia relationships become even more closer in the years to come. Thank you, Ambassador Sajjan, for the discussion.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on strengthening bilateral relationship between India and Saudi Arabia. The participants were Ashok Sajjanhar, former diplomat, and Vinay Kumar, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on a mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 9289094044.